Okay, so this talk is about the art of teaching, how to teach anyone absolutely anything. If you would like to follow along with the slides, you are welcome to follow. You can hold your camera up to the link here and follow along. It is DinoJS, or it's bit.ly.dinojs-Lori. Okay. All right, this is me. I am Lori Culberson. I am a software engineer at Home Depot. And we have a program at Home Depot where we actually have a code school inside of our company. And that is where I work. I teach React and JavaScript and how to deploy apps with pipelines and those kind of things. I am also a Turing School graduate. I used to teach for 13 years in the public school system in Houston, Texas. And there was a time when I loved teaching, and I still love teaching, but there was a point in my career when I said, I'm ready to do something different. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm going to do something different, and when I find it, it's going to be great. And I'm leaving the classroom forever. And then Home Depot called and said, we want you to teach coding. And I thought, oh, I'm going back in the classroom. But this time it'll be with adults. Okay, so here's the purpose of this talk. We're going to talk about how students learn, and then we're going to talk about what are some of the best practices that help students learn in an empathetic and safe environment. Let's go ahead and level set on some vocabulary first and foremost. What is a teacher? A teacher is someone who has knowledge that they want to share. It could be a mentor. It could be a senior developer. It could be an instructor to an entire workshop or a class. It could be a junior developer talking with another junior developer. What is a student? A student is someone who learns from a teacher. It could be a mentee. It could be a mid-level developer. It could be a code school student. It could be your pairing partner. How do we learn? Before I go on to about how we learn, the important thing with this talk is that you identify yourself as an instructor in some capacity. At some point, you are going to be asked to explain something to someone, whether it's one-on-one or one on whole group, because that's what we do. We, as software engineers, we love to share what we know. And so I'm going to give you a few tips that will help you do that more effectively. But let's talk a little bit about how we learn. If I ran up on stage and I said to you, I bought a yippee bop, who on earth would know what I was talking about? No one? What did your brain do? Some of you, maybe you were in the spelling bee, you were like, can I have the language of origin? Are there alternative pronunciations? But all of you started to look for some clues. What if I said, I bought a yippee bop. My old one wouldn't start yesterday, and the mechanic said the repairs would be really expensive. What does your brain do now? Your brain makes a checklist. It found some clues. Your brain said, okay, it's something that can start. You can buy one. Requires a mechanic from time to time. And the repairs are expensive. Now, I know you know I'm from Houston. It's not a tractor. Must be a car. What I did for you in that second sentence was I helped you build schema. I helped you make a connection from something you did not know to connect to what I wanted you to learn. Schema are building blocks for knowledge. It's like, think of it like ticky-tack. It's something for the knowledge that you didn't know to stick to in order for you to gain a greater context. It's information that you needed to know before the information makes sense. Why is this important? Because new knowledge is built on already existing knowledge and prior experiences. And this is a concept that was coined by Jean Piaget, a Swiss psychologist. And he realized that you cannot learn something new unless you have some sort of schema or you have some context for the new knowledge to stick to. As an educator, and you are all educators, you are all teachers at some point, or you will be at some point in time. Your role is to help someone build schema. How do you do that? How do you help facilitate schema building? You make the content meaningful, you make it relatable, and you make it personal by connecting the learner to something they already understand. In the first example, I bought a Yippee Bop. That content was not relatable. It was not personal to you. You had no connection to that word. The second sentence, I made it more relatable. I gave it some meaning. I made it personal to you. Because at some point, you've probably been in a car or someone tried to pick you up and they were late because their car broke down. You understand the idea of expensive repairs for a vehicle. How do we generally teach? How do we generally convey knowledge to someone who does not know something? More often than not, we have a tendency to teach in the same way that we like to learn, in the same way that we like to receive information. Generally speaking, I am a very auditory learner. I like to hear things. You will often hear me say, if I ask you to explain something to me, can you say that again? Can you say it a different way? Because when you're talking to me, I'm going to take the words and I'm going to turn them into a picture so that I can map it to my brain to connect to something that I already know. That's how I learn best. What we have to understand is when we're teaching, our students do not necessarily learn in the same modality by which we teach. Now, let me say this about learning styles. Unless you have some sort of impairment, you learn using all of them. So some people say, oh, I'm an auditory learner. I'm read-write. I like blog posts. Just give me the docs. God bless you. Give me YouTube. I need to hear it. I need to see it. I need to play with it. But we all use all of these particular modalities in order to learn. So as an educator, if you are working with a large class, you want to make sure that if you are developing curriculum or you are explaining something to someone, that you do not just focus on one way. You want to give a better chance for that learner to grasp that concept with whatever is their flavor of learning. How should we teach? There are 4 primary ways that I'm going to talk about to help set learners up for success. Number 1, set the stage for a no-judgment learning zone. Here's what that means. Before you start working with someone, whether it is a one-on-one, two-on-one, workshop, make sure they understand that you are empathetic to them. I'm not going to judge you. If you have a question, if you make a mistake, it's fine. It's okay. I've made them all. Here's the one that's a little hard for some people to grasp, and it is the thing that I learned when I was teaching elementary school. If students do not understand a concept that you are teaching, it is you, the instructor, who needs to find a different way to convey the content to them. It's very easy for us to say, they get paid a lot of money, so I'm going to go over it once, and they need to figure it out. We work with people who say that. But if you embrace the role of an instructor as a true educator, your goal should be to help the person understand. I'll tell you how I learned this lesson. At one point in my teaching career, very early, I sat with our instructional specialist. I taught math and science. We had a benchmark exam, and I was good. My kids did well. And I walked into the office with my little notebook of my lesson plans and grades, and I was ready for anything. Fire any question at me, I got it. And our instructional specialist said, Lori, your students did really well on objective A and B, but on C, they were below 50%. I opened up my notes and I said, I covered that content on these days. I gave an assessment. These are the lab activities that I did. I taught the content. And she said, Lori, you may have taught the content. Your students didn't learn it. I was armed for everything but that, because I was good. But that instructional specialist made me better, because she understood that I had the skill set to be a good educator, but what I lacked was making sure that every single one of my kids understood the content that I needed to convey to them. And that's when I became a better teacher. Number 2, the second of the ways that we set learners up for success. Provide learner with clues. The tech industry is riddled with acronyms. You go from company to company. CI/CD is one thing at one company, and the D changes when you move to another company. You can't keep up. So why do we have our juniors and mid-levels who won't raise their hand and admit they don't know? Why do we let them struggle? Spell it out for them, tell them. Give it to them for free. If you're talking in a group meeting, go ahead and spell out the acronyms. Go ahead and give a brief description or explanation of the new vocabulary. By new, I mean you know it, you know your peers know it. Maybe there's a couple people in the room who are not familiar with the term. It is free. It is a few extra words. Spell it out. Hey, we're working with this new CDN that we created. Just in your head, like as you're talking, add the comma. You know, the content delivery network. And if you see maybe some confusion, say, give an example of when this person who is new to the group, maybe when they've used it. Remember when we used Bootstrap? Remember we had to install Bootstrap in the first project? Give them a clue. Don't keep them in the dark. Just help them out. 3, explain in bite-sized pieces. Avoid verbally overwhelming explanations. Talk for only 3 to 5 minutes, and then check for understanding. You need to take a picture of this, put a gold star next to that talk for only 3 to 5 minutes, and check for understanding. Here's why. As you're listening to someone talk, not me, of course, but as you're listening to someone talk, you're processing what they're telling you. And if it's information that they need, like you're building some software together, they need to process that so they can go execute a task. You want them to know what to do. I remember once I was talking to one of my colleagues a while back, and he was so excited because he built a React Native application, and he was telling me all about it, and I was excited because I wanted to learn React Native. At the 17-minute mark of him talking at me, he finished and said, "What do you think?" And I said, I tried to jump in and ask you a question around the 3-minute mark. I didn't hear anything you said after that. The brain can only absorb what the brain can process. So give people a chance to stop and ask questions. But as you as an educator need to check for understanding. And here's how we do that. As you are finishing up a topic. You want to get some feedback as to whether or not they got what it is that you explained. So you're going to ask them, hey, why don't you go ahead and take a few minutes. I'm going to go get some coffee. When I come back, I want you to explain back to me what you understood we just talked about. You could do that as a one-on-one. What you're doing by giving them time, quiet think time, is giving them an opportunity to maybe do a little Google search, maybe just gather their thoughts. But the other thing you are doing is allowing their anxiety to decrease. How many times have you had someone ask you a question, maybe it was in class, and you didn't know the answer right away? And all of a sudden you froze. You had a lot of anxiety in that time frame. So let's just get rid of the anxiety. Here's another way you can do that if you have a large class. You can do a technique called pair and share. I've taught you a thing. Now here's what I want you to do. Greet the person next to you, say hello, give them a fist bump. Talk about 2 things you learned and maybe 1 thing that you found confusing. I'm going to go get some coffee. I'll be back. Here's what you've done. Now no one has to admit and raise their hand in front of the entire class and say, I didn't understand this 1 thing, because they're not going to do it. I've worked with 4th graders. I've worked with 40-year-olds. They don't do it. No one wants to call themselves out and say, I didn't get it. So now they have a peer. And now they know, oh, the peer didn't get it either. And if I am still in the room, I'll walk through the aisles and listen. 9 times out of 10, they're confused on the same thing. And guess what that means to me? I have to reteach. I didn't explain something well enough that a large percentage of the class didn't get. Okay? You can also have people write a summary of what they learned. I like to draw pictures. I like to draw pictures, annotate the pictures, and then go back to the person that I work with and say, okay, let me explain this to you. Let me tell you what I think I heard you say. And here's the important part. If you are the person who taught something and you're waiting for someone to tell you what they learned, stop talking. Put your hand over your mouth. Listen. Listen, let them explain the entire thing wrong. Don't say a word, because here's why. At some point, they might catch themselves and correct themselves to figure out where they went wrong. And that's a really good learning tool for the learner.
To catch those mistakes. Too often we want to go, oh, wait, no, wait, oh, I know you just started, but that first thing was wrong. Okay, let me try again. What I think, okay, well, now the rest of your theory is out the window. You don't know what we're saying because you've already been shot down and told you were wrong. So, as educators, learn to shut up. How confusion impacts learning. There is a good side too. Okay. There is a benefit to confusion, and it is this as follows.
Just going in my pocket. Okay, so there is a benefit to confusion. There was a study done at Columbia University in 2012, and here's what the results of the study said. It said that making mistakes, or making errors, facilitates learning, as long as corrective feedback follows. Any of you who've ever built software and made some serious mistakes, I don't know, messed up a migration, I don't know, deleted a database, bet you did it once. You learn from your mistakes. The corrective feedback was, I know what to do now. I'm not going to make that mistake again. There is a drawback to confusion. In a 2010 study of software engineering students at Manila University, they did a study, and here was the result. They found that if students started out confused, and they stayed confused, it impacted their learning very negatively. They became frustrated, and they became bored. They lost interest. How many of you have ever started a Udemy tutorial? Something went wrong with your setup. You got to like step 3, you were all jazzed, and oh gosh, I can't figure out why this isn't working. You go through the notes, you start emailing the instructor, they don't message you back. We know that would never happen to Sarah. But you got stuck. You tried to figure it out, and you're like, forget it. You didn't finish the tutorial. I know there's a few of you in there. I know I'm not the only one. So, why is this important? It validates the need to tighten the feedback loop and check for understanding more frequently to reduce the duration of confused. The longer you are confused, the more irritated you get, and the more likely you are to not complete the task. You walk away. I've seen it in students. I've seen it before. I've seen it in 4th graders. I've seen it in 40-year-olds. I've seen people in my class just get so overwhelmed and frustrated, they decide to go, I'm gonna go get coffee. I'm like, now? It's because they were frustrated and they couldn't keep up. So, tighten that feedback loop. Check in with your students. Check in with your pair. Make sure they are on the right path. Give them corrected feedback once they have gone through their. Okay? Why we should avoid sarcasm. Sarcasm is defined as a use of irony to mock or convey contempt. Let me tell you what happened on or at a job which will remain nameless. My first week, I had an assigned mentor, and I said, hey, I'm not sure I understand how to set this dev environment. Can you help me? And his response was, seriously? I thought you went to Harvard. This is not a shameless plug for the fact that I went to Harvard. However, I never forgot this, and this was very early in my career as a software engineer. How does that help me? Guess who I never asked for help from again? I found anyone else in the chain of people who worked on our development team to ask questions to. I never asked this person for help again. Sarcastic comments are put-downs wrapped in humor. There was an article in Psychology Today written by Clifford Lazarus, and the title is called Think Sarcasm is Funny, Think Again. And one of the quotes from the article said this: despite smiling outwardly, many people who receive sarcastic comments feel put down and often think the sarcastic person is a jerk. I mean, it's scientific. I'm not making this up. Sarcasm does not belong in a classroom when you are working with someone who doesn't understand something. Is it worth the risk? And what's funny is people who are sarcastic, they think they're funny. But the people who are on the other side of the sarcasm don't. So you make your decision as to whether or not you would like to be sarcastic. So what did you learn in the last 20 minutes? Here's what I would like for you to do. Make a friend. Turn to your neighbor. Talk to someone in front of you, behind you, to your left, to your right. You have 20 seconds to discuss something that you learned, something that maybe you had an aha moment about, and then we'll review. 20 seconds starts now. Okay, let's review what I wanted you to learn from this talk. We talked about how we learn. We talked about making connections to something that is familiar to the learner. You got to build that schema, got to give the new information something to stick to. We talked about how you should teach, best practices. Ask questions. Give your student a chance to answer. Give them a chance to make a mistake. Give them a chance to learn something. Confusion, double-edged sword. If you get confused and you solve it, you get some feedback, you're good. You've deepened your learning. You get confused, you stay confused too long, it's detrimental. So don't let people stay confused for too long. And lastly, sarcasm. It does more harm than good. Thank you.
The first question I have here from Twitter says, what are some good, quick questions to check for understanding while teaching?
Oh, that's a great question. Good first question. So you want to make sure that you ask the student things like, so what do you think is happening here? What do you, like if you're looking at a block of code, walk me through this. Play computer and tell me what's happening at each step. Another good question would be, if you were going to explain this to one of your coworkers, how would you explain it? That way you get inside their head. The important thing is to get people talking. You have to know what is in their head, because then you'll know where the misconception is. And then when you hear the misconception, you can start thinking about, how can I unravel this? But you cannot fix someone's line of thinking until you know what they're thinking. Another thing I wanted to add is, if you are in front of a large group, there's some questions you want to avoid. And some of those questions include, how many of you didn't understand what I just said? Who's going to raise their hand? Okay, I would, because I don't really care. But who wants to admit to in front of their peers, especially since I work in a corporate environment and sometimes we have teams of people coming, who wants to be the person that says, I'm a senior engineer and I have no idea what she just said? It's not going to happen. And that so you let them talk to themselves or with their peers. And usually a peer can explain something a little better.
So the next question here also from Twitter. Thank you, Marcus, for that question. So the next question is coming from Ryan. He says, is the 3 to 5 rule the result of a scientific study, or was it something that you just learned from experience?
Just being in the classroom. There is a study that talks about wait time after you ask a question. I know that has nothing to do really with how long you should talk, but I really equate that to how long do you want to listen to someone talk to you? Or sometimes it's talking at you. So the next question here is from Vicky.
The part about letting learners be confused, how long is too long for a learner to be confused?
I don't know if there is a time limit on how long someone can be confused. I think you have to kind of watch and monitor. So when I teach classes, I generally will walk the aisles, because I want to make sure people aren't checking their email, that they're on Slack, or committing fixes to code. You're in class to learn. And so as I'm walking through the aisles, I'm asking people, okay, show me your app. What's happening here? Okay, this doesn't seem to be working. This is the part you're working on. Do you need help, or do you need me to come back in a few minutes? So I give them that opportunity to say, okay, I'm still playing with it. Like, if they're still excited about playing with it, then I let them play with it. If they're like, I don't know, you can tell just by talking with someone where they are emotionally with their code.
So, some will say, I know this is a quote somewhere, I don't know where it came from, but they say patience is a virtue, right? And I feel like sometimes that can be a little odd or restrictive because it makes it sound like you either are a patient person or you're not. Do you think that patience is something that as patience seems like it's something that is very important while teaching. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. And do you think like it's a skill that you can, or something that you can learn? And like, how do you learn how to do that and how to be more patient?
I think some people would say have children. I don't have any biological children, but I taught fourth graders, and they were all my kids for many years, so I felt like a parent. And that, I think teaching taught me patience. Whenever you are responsible for someone's learning, they are vulnerable to you, and so I always just wanted to be empathetic, and sometimes empathetic was sitting and just listening, and that was me exercising patience, was listening, and sometimes I just didn't want to, but I had to in order to build that relationship so that we had a good classroom experience. Great.
So the last question I have is just, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey to, just software development coming from education background?
Sure. So I taught for a number of years in the Houston School District. Actually, it was a northern suburb called Spring ISD. And I was always, it was a natural attraction to just help people and teach, and I could figure out what was tripping people up. I don't know how, but I could figure it out just by talking to them. But at some point, I started a computer science club for students who were like 2nd through 5th grade, and they had a lot of fun with learning how to like build algorithms and watch the little angry bird navigate through the maze. And so they had a lot of fun doing that, and I thought, this is a lot of fun. And I realized that that's what software engineers did. And so I started thinking, okay, well, I also want to build this app. I think I may want to learn some software engineering techniques. The other thing is I tried to build an app. I contacted a software engineer. They said it would cost $15,000 for them to build this feature that I wanted. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. That's the same cost as Turing. I may as well just go to learn it myself. So when Turing was lower priced. It ain't 15 anymore.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. Give her a round of applause.